Hello, this is Alyssa Lenhoff-Briggs, and I am extremely proud to say that I am the co-director of the STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice. I say that I am proud today because of how you have all come together as a true community of practice in recent days. We have heard from so many of you who want to offer resources, share ideas, and support STEM learning for all amid the terrible chaos that is surrounding us. And we're hearing from also so many who need that support. It's times like this that dramatically underscore and truly magnify the need for more students to enter STEM disciplines. We need big thinkers to help make our world better and safer and happier and, of course, healthier. And we know you agree. We have seen your resolve to support the STEM learning for all. Last month, last year, and now in the face of so many obstacles. Thank you all for sharing your ideas and stepping up to offer resources. From funders to sponsors to ecosystem leaders and individual parents, we've seen an outpouring of support of people and organizations who want to keep advancing your work with providing meaningful and connected STEM opportunities for all. Thank you all so very much. TIES has developed STEM at Home, a curated set of resources for you to use and share as broadly as you can for parents who need support keeping STEM learning going in these trying times. Today's webinar is part of STEM at Home. And to introduce today's webinar and discuss the ongoing series we will be launching, I would now like to turn things over to Veronica Gonzalez, co-director of the initiative.
Thanks so much, Alyssa, and greetings, everyone. We really thank you for joining us today, and echo the sentiments of hoping that everybody is healthy, safe, and staying sane in this time. The STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice is really proud to announce the release of STEM at Home, a compilation of resources and webinars to support the community. We will be hosting regular webinars for both STEM community leaders as well as families to be able to do activities at home. Our community leader series will provide the space and time for STEM leaders to share common challenges, ideas, and resources. And our STEM family series will support families with children at home to offer practical tips, virtual experiments, and other tools to support learning. All family members are welcome on these, especially those with no teaching experience, and the workshops will be focused on doing activities with very little equipment and things that you can have lying around your house. You can find more information on our website at stemecosystems.org, which we will continue to update as things unfold. Very quickly, logistical things. You are all muted now just to help us eliminate background noise. We do encourage you to ask questions and to engage with us throughout this webinar by using the chat box. Feel free to email us at info@stemecosystems.org should you have any questions that come up after this webinar. We are recording and plan to post the recording online. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our guest for today, Laura Overdeck. Laura is the founder and president of Bedtime Math Foundation, a nonprofit organization that ignites kids' curiosity and learning by unleashing the fun in math. She is the author of 4 best-selling children's books published by Macmillan Children's Publishing Group. Overdeck also writes Bedtime Math daily math challenges at bedtimemath.org and directs a growing number of national partnerships to increase children's access to kid-appealing math. Thank you so much for being with us, Laura, and now it is my pleasure to hand the mic over to you.
Sure, thank you so much. Can you hear me? Is that working?
We can.
Great, okay, and there's my screen. Welcome everybody. Thank you so much for taking time to be on this call, especially during such a crazy time in our country. I know that everybody's lives have been turned upside down. We hope everybody's healthy, and we're just trying to move forward, particularly for our kids and helping them keep up with their learning, and helping parents and teachers figure out how to be a part of that. If there was ever a time where the STEM ecosystems can play a great role, it's right now. We've always been thrilled to partner with them, but we're seeing at a time like this that it's just such a great way to get the word out to a lot of people. So this presentation is called Cabin Fever Math, acknowledging that a lot of people all over the country are home, parents with, trying to do work with kids at home, or they're having to leave for work and their kids are home. We really just have so much turmoil. And with lots of kids home and bouncing off the walls, it's just people are really hungry for ideas of just how to keep them occupied and stimulated and engaged. And that's what we're going to talk about today. What I'm going to do is give a quick history of what Bedtime Math is for those of you who don't know who we are, and just really quick, and then we're going to get into the activities so you can see some really fun stuff that we offer that we think can be of help. So to start, the situation we're in right now is that with schools being closed all across the country, suddenly kids are now being offered online learning because schools want to do something. On top of that, kids already do a lot of their recreation online. So what we have is a situation where now kids are doing not only their recreation online, but their 6 or 7 hours of school day that they're normally with teachers and other kids is also online. And on top of it, parents who are home, a lot of people are home now doing things over conference calls. They don't have time to play. So kids are suddenly feeling an immense amount of isolation from their normal interactions with people. It's just a really disruptive time. And, when you think about that, it's just not healthy. And I wanted to mention a study that I think, if there was ever a time where this is a seminal study to think about, was a Stanford study from a few years ago in 2015. They looked at children at age 8 and then watched them for 6 years. And at age 14, at the end of the study, they looked back to see who was good at math. And they looked to see what had predicted along the way, what could have told them ahead of time who was going to end up being good at math at age 14. And they found that it was not grades, test scores, memory, none of the things you would think. It turned out the best predictor was the child's MRI of their brain at age 8. In other words, at age 8, already some kids' brains were structured differently. They had more connections between the spatial part of the brain and the enumeration part of the brain. Basically, algebra and geometry are handled in 2 different parts of the brain. The kids who had more connections between those 2 parts ended up being better at math than those who didn't. Now, that in one sense is incredibly disheartening to hear that, because we think, oh my gosh, is it all over at age 8? It is not at all, because there's no evidence that all that structure is there when kids are born. Your brain is much more of a soup when you're born. But it does show that if you have stimulation, as we know with reading and other skills, stimulation and activity cause the brain to grow. And it is so important that kids don't just stare at numbers on a page, that when they're learning, they're using their hands, their bodies, and thinking spatially also, because it knits together those 2 parts of the brain and just really, it gives the kids a huge leg up in their learning. I bring this up because, I think this crisis is kind of a wake-up call to think about how we do things in school. And now with this disruption, it's also causing a lot of creativity. It's actually an opportunity. Looking at where we are, we know there's been a lot of people tearing their hair out about how US kids score against other countries in math. It's also becoming clear the past week or so, as everybody's moving online to do their learning, a lot of the online learning is unfortunately just worksheets in online form, which really isn't ideal. And there's also been a finding about how things go on in school that only 8% of the lessons taught actually require thinking. This was a study, you see the footnote, by the New Teacher Project back in 2017. They actually observed 900 lessons in schools and found that only 8% of them really forced you to have to think about what you were doing. And that's because so much of what comes out of curricula is just plug and chug, where you learn one skill and you do 20 math problems on that one skill. It's too easy to mechanize it and just keep moving the decimal to the left, or always picking the middle number and saying that's the tens place. It's when you mix things up that you force thinking, and that's when learning happens. So I think that with everybody suddenly home and being hungry to do things in a more hands-on way, it's an opportunity to rethink all this. So that brings us really quickly to what Bedtime Math is all about. For those who aren't familiar, this is an idea from my own house. When my 3 kids were younger, we started doing a math problem every night with them, just like we'd read them their bedtime story and then do a math problem. And it would just be made up about whatever we talked about at dinner. Ninjas, chocolate chips, flamingos, pillow forts, whatever came off the top of our head. We'd tell a little story and then ask 3 levels of questions, mainly because I had 3 kids. We'd have kind of a pre-K level question, a kindergarten to first grade question, and then like a second or third grade level question, all about stuff they just love. An example, this is one that eventually wound up on our website, chickens playing the xylophone. This was actually a viral video that was online, and the math problem about it talked about the video and then asks questions like, how many chickens do you see in the picture? Or which colored bar is 2 to the left of the green one? Or if there are 8 chickens and they're playing 6 different notes on the xylophone, how many aren't getting hit? They're just infinite math questions that you can come up with from real life situations. And that's what we want to convey to kids. Math is not just some dry, tedious thing that you do in school. It's actually part of your real life. And that is what makes it engaging and exciting. So in 2012, I started, thanks to hyper-competitive parents in my town wanting to know what I was doing with my children, I started emailing out the math problem every night. This eventually became an app. We also have it go out on the website, and I've written 4 books, as was mentioned. I think the thing we're most proud of is that the University of Chicago studied 600 kids, where 300 did our math app and 300 did it in the reading app form. They just read the opening story and then did reading questions about it. And they found that the 300 that got the math version ended up 3 months ahead in their school math skills in just one school year. Kids doing playful math with their parents or their caregivers, it has an enormous impact. And it's because it becomes engaging and because it reduces math anxiety. With that, we then went on and created an after-school club called Crazy Eights, where we ship a free kit of materials that groups can use to play games that we've invented ourselves that have a lot of math. I've put a few sample names there. And at this point, we have up to 24 weeks of activities with no reruns. And it's really a chance, if someone, a parent, a teacher, if you can get together 12 kids within an age range and find a place, we will ship you the free kit and you can do a weekly math club for 8 weeks. And when you're done, we can send you the next kit. And this has grown enormously as well. Because again, I think kids and families are really hungry for fun math. It is from Crazy Eights and the Bedtime Math problem that we now have some suggestions for what to do during this coronavirus crisis. One is the nightly math. That's a free thing that goes out on the web. Anybody can get it. And I'm going to talk about that a little more later, but basically an engaging thing for parents to do with their kids. I should note that it's all about the parent holding the device. The child is not on the device. It's an app delivering fun stories for parents to read to their kids, followed by questions they can ask them. And we're also working on possibly developing videos around this. That's still a work in progress, but this is, that's one of our 2 offerings. And then the other one is what we're calling Cabin Fever Math, where we're taking some of the hands-on games from Crazy Eights, and instead of having it work for 12 children, have it work for just 1 or 2, so families can do it at home. And now we'll get started looking at those. So our first one is Beach Ball Party. Now, I've shown a ball here that we make and that we actually sell at cost online if people want to get it. We're a nonprofit, we don't profit from any of this. But people can also take a ball that they have and just tape numbers to it to achieve the same thing. And I'm actually going to over to myself for a second. So here's our ball. This is me, Laura, and this is the Bedtime Math beach ball. And the way this game works is if you take a ball like this, or number one that you have yourself, two kids or a child and parent can just chuck it back and forth and play volleyball, essentially. And when you catch the ball, you can see what numbers did your two fingers come closest to, your two thumbs. I have 5 and 3. And then from that, you can come up with math questions. So for little kids, you can say which number is bigger. They catch it, they get 5 and 3, they say 5 is bigger. Or you can do count up from one to the other, because by the way, that's a tricky skill. A lot of kids who feel they're great at counting can start at 1, but if you say, okay, start at 4, that's actually harder. So they can catch it and get 5 and 9 and say, okay, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. With kids a little older, let's say first grade, they can toss it back and forth. When they catch it, they add the two numbers. As kids get more skilled, you can throw it back and forth. They multiply the two digits. You can really invent any game you want. You can subtract. You can take the two numbers and make it a 2-digit number that they have to double. But the point is, it's incredibly lively. It's just a fun, lively way to have them actually practice math facts without realizing that that's what they're doing. With that, I'm going to go back to our deck. So that's one game where that's in our Crazy Eights kit. And also at the end of all this, I'm going to show the link to the web page where we have all these games listed and information if people want to see how to make the beach ball or how to order one, and then, you know, all the other games we're going to talk about here. So that's one game. The next one, let's get the slide going. So this is one that we call M&M March Madness, because sadly with basketball canceled, we've got to come up with some other sport, and we think math is a great one. This is a really simple thing to do with kids. If you open an M&M pack and just group the M&Ms by color and then line them up this way, you are essentially teaching how to make a bar graph, which is a really critical skill, not only how to make one, but someday when these kids are adults, they're going to be reading the newspaper and look at things like this, and they're going to want to know how they work and how to understand it. And this is a colorful, playful, yummy way to do it. If you go to our site and download the instructions for this, there's a page. This page is in there and you can print it out. Or if you don't have a printer working, you can just draw it out by hand. Just make the two axes, mark off your colors, and mark off your y-axis, the vertical line, and you can number it if you want. Interestingly, this is a real M&M packet that I opened. I don't know why there were so many green ones, but we then did it with another packet and had completely different numbers. So it got like really interesting for my kids to play with this. It's just intriguing. And then as we've been eating them, every time someone takes an M&M, they actually draw a little circle so we can keep track of how many we ate, which is so funny. My kids came up with that. It's just simple, easy statistics. And of course, with older kids, you can really get into questions of, okay, how many of these are the same? What's the mean? What's the average number of M&Ms of a color? You can talk about maximum, minimum. You can roll in whatever you want. And to that point, I wanted to note something, which is that I think sometimes we don't give kids as much credit for what they could contemplate and could think about. Sometimes people say, ooh, that idea sounds more like for older kids. We should never worry about that, because what's great about doing stuff at home is there is no pressure, there are no grades, there are no scores. It's a chance to throw out more advanced ideas and not worry that it's going to be intimidating or anything, because it's not school, it's playtime, and it's just such a fabulous time to explore math. So you can really go to town with this one. Okay. Here's a game we call Pirate Treasure Hunt. This is one that we invented ourselves. And this one also is kind of an expansion of graphing. What happens here is you can either do this on a tabletop, and when you find the instructions for this, you can print the blank of this picture, or you can make a grid on your floor, just running masking tape on the floor every 6 inches. Make a big grid and play it on the floor life size, which is also really fun. And the idea is that, I'm going to move one slide forward, you cut out little pairs of coordinates. and you put them in a hat, and kids take turns picking the coordinates. Oh, actually, let me back up a second. Before you start the game, you actually make this picture. You are first given coordinates to draw these dots and connect them, like connect the dots, and you end up drawing a ship and an island. And if you do it on the floor, you can take red yarn or string or anything you have handy, curling ribbon, and tape it down. And if you follow the coordinates in order, you get this picture. And then the way you play the game is you have random coordinates like this that you cut out and put in a hat. And as kids pick coordinates, they then see where they land on the map. And they see whether they land on the ship or in the ocean or on the island. And the first person to land on the island wins the treasure. You then just put all the coordinates back in the hat and you can play again. And we have heard from our after school clubs that kids really get into this and will play this game 5 or 6 times. And it's so funny because, again, we're teaching them a really critical skill, which is plotting points on a graph or on graph paper on 2 axes. And it's just great practice for that, getting them really facile with that skill, but in a super fun way. And again, there's a floor version or you can do the tabletop. Those 3 games were all pretty sedate. You know, you can do them sitting down or standing in a room. Here's a game that we have, which we call Get a Jump on It. That is a classic hopscotch board. And this is to kind of get up and moving on a nice day. You can do this outside. And the way we play this game is that instead of just throwing the rock and jumping through the hopscotch through the standard moves, what you do is you throw the rock to land on a number, let's say 2, and then as you make your way through the hopscotch, you have to do math with the number you hit. So if it's 2, let's say you're going to add the number 2 to every number. So when you land on the 3, you have to say 3 + 2 is 5. Or you land on the 6, it's now 8. You land on the 9, it's 11. You could instead decide to subtract 2. So as you go through hopping on the squares, you're subtracting 2 from each number. You can also multiply. So this is similar to the beach ball. You're taking something fun, like playing hopscotch or throwing a ball, and you're actually working in math practice. As a sidebar, because I do get this question a lot, people ask us, you know, how do you feel about memorizing math facts? Is that good? How do you feel about flashcards? And our answer is, it's not that flashcards are really fun, and I don't think that flashcards win over anybody to loving math. But understanding and knowing your facts fluently is critical to making math fun in class, because when you start to get to harder math like division, you know, long division, multiplying big numbers, everything else, if you don't know your easy facts, it's almost like driving down a highway and you have to keep pulling off onto the exit ramp and stop at the red light and be like, oh yeah, what's 5 × 4? And then pulling back on the highway. And then pulling off, ooh, what's 7 × 9? It just keeps you from getting in the groove. What you really want to do when you get an interesting math problem is to just fly down the highway, right? And have that stuff be second nature so you can focus on the cool math problem that you're solving instead of trying to remember your facts. We feel that math fluency is just suffering terribly in this country, and that getting better at that is important. But drill and kill is not the way to do it. You want to make it fun. And that's why we have games like this and the beach ball. Okay, let's move on to the next game. So here's one that we call Face Off. And I have to give a shout out to the New York Hall of Science because we ripped this off from a really cool game they had on an app. It's on an iPads at the museum. But we made it, we're old school, and we made it hands-on with paper. And the idea is that 2 players, and this can be a parent and child or 2 kids, draw a picture and then cut it into squares. This example I have here has 25 squares for each. And what you do is you then first talk about, well, what fraction of the picture is each square? It's 1/25. What percent of it is it? And in the case of 25 squares, it's 4%. And then what decimal is each square? It's 0.04. And by the way, in our activity that you can download, this is one of the harder ones. You can also cut the picture just into 10 pieces or 20. And we have grids with faint lines where kids can draw their picture and then you cut on the dotted lines to make whatever number of pieces you want. If you do 10 pieces, you would say, well, each one is 1/10. It's 10% and it's 0.1. Once they've nailed that down, that's important because then they roll a die and they, however many dots they get, let's say they roll a 5, they then switch that number of squares with their partner and it just starts to make really wacky faces. And they keep taking turns rolling the die, and the winner is the person who's the first to cross some threshold, like you're aiming to switch 15 squares or 17 of them. And the reason we love this game and we love the app that New York Hall of Science invented is because the fact is a lot of America cannot calculate the tip. And I think that's almost as much of an emergency for national security as what we're facing now. We really have a lot of adults with college degrees who are not comfortable calculating the tip, and that's a 4th and 5th grade math skill. There's just no reason to have it be this way. And again, drill and kill can really be very non-engaging, and that's not going to result in kids learning. We love a game like this because it's making it really fun. And getting back to that point about lessons that make you think, there's no way to play this game without thinking. And yet there's no way to play this game without having fun with it, because kids love drawing their own pictures, cutting them up and switching them. And that, again, is another game that's on our website. You can download the grids and the templates. And I should also point out that with all of these games, we have grids and axes and things you can print, but we've made it very clear that if you don't have a printer, you can very easily draw it out yourself. We want to be sensitive to the fact that sometimes people don't have a printer at home, or it's run out of ink, or they're just running low on supplies. We've tried to make these games so they really work for as many people as possible in any situation, because it's all simple and hands-on and very doable. So here's another one that's a little more active, Take Flight. I just grabbed some pictures from the script, which shows how to fold your classic paper airplane. But there are lots of ways to fold an airplane, and there's a lot of math you can do with it. Simply, of course, kids can make the airplane and just throw them across the room and then measure how far it went. Gets them using rulers and measuring tapes. If you don't have one handy, they can count footsteps and use that as a unit and get used to this idea of units of measurement. With older kids, if they chuck those airplanes a few times, lots of opportunities to do statistics, just like with the M&M game. And if you have a protractor, this one also works in geometry. It's really cool when you're folding all the triangles to see what angles you get. And you start to see that an angle in one place is always going to be equal to an angle in another place because you've got symmetric triangles. Or when do they add up to 90 or 180? So again, the paper airplane, just such a simple, fun thing that kids love, but you can get a lot of math out of it. Another game that we have in here, Funny Money. What we've done with this one is, money is a key skill. You want kids to learn what those coins mean. There's some really cool facts about them. If you have equal weight of quarters in one bag and the same weight of dimes in another bag, they will actually also have the same monetary value, which is kind of cool. I only learned that recently. But what we do in this game is really, it's combinatorials. What you do is you find an item in your house that's a prize. It could be a sparkly pencil or a snack. And you say to your kids, okay, you can have this for 43 cents. How many ways can you make 43 cents out of a pile of coins? And it turns out there are only limited ways, especially if you say one of the coins has to be a quarter. And what the game does is walks you through some different options, and we give the answers so that you can guide kids with these games. And it's just a matter of having a pile of coins. You don't need a lot of coins lying around to do this game. But again, just getting kids not only fluent in adding, because you're adding 25s and 10s and 5s and 1s, but also this idea of combinatorials. And, we don't teach combinatorials until middle school, I think, but it is a really important thing to be able to just understand. And we feel that this is a skill we can work in with this. Okay, I think that is the full set of what I was going to talk about today. But as you see here, and I think this deck will be available to people, but you can also copy down this link. This link points to our Cabin Fever math page, and we have far more games than what I just went through. I just gave you some examples to give you a feel for the mix of livening kids up versus settling them down, different kinds of math facts, geometry, statistics. We really try to hit all different kinds of skills. And some of the games are quick hits, and some of them are more of a deep dive, and you can pick what you're in the mood for. What we also are trying to do is show that with a lot of these games, once kids get going, they can be self-occupied. We're very sensitive to the fact that sometimes parents, while they're stuck home all these weeks, need a break. Parents need a break. They need to be able to go and have a glass of wine. It's great if your kids, once you set up a game, can then be playing it themselves and learning and engaging and interacting with their siblings or whoever's around. So we've kept that in mind as we've adapted the games for this. And we are continuing to add more games. We're combing through all our games from Crazy Eights, as well as some games we came up with that did not work well for 12 kids. All of a sudden, there's a moment in time for those. So you can keep checking back to this page to see what else we've put up. And I want to make a note, too, that for those of you on the line who are educators, we have been asked to start bringing these games into the classroom. And so for 2 years here in New Jersey, which is where we are based, we've been actually teaching the games to teachers for them to use in class. And we are here, and in doing that, it's just, this is articulating kind of the same goals that these games had anyway, but very explicitly, it's to make math engaging. It's to serve different styles of learners. Because remember, I talked about the brain and how you have different things going on in different parts. Some kids are very visual, some are very kinetic. And sometimes when a student doesn't get it the first time, showing it a totally different way can make it click. And then the third point is creative ways to fill gaps and provide greater challenges. Kids in a classroom are at all different levels of achievement and attainment that they've gotten to. And with our games, when we bring them into the classroom, we really talk about all the different levels, as I just did here with the ones we talked about. There's an easy version, there's a kindergarten version of it. There's kind of a second grade skill to it. There's a fifth grade skill. And liberating teachers to be able to let students enter at the right entry point for them is just critical, because as we talk about at Bedtime Math all the time, if you can't add, there's not much point in sitting through a lesson on multiplying. We really want to make sure everybody's adding before they're moving on to multiplying. And that holds for all of the K through 12 scaffolding. So I'm just giving a heads up. This is something that we're going to be doing. And over this coming year in New Jersey, we are going to be expanding, I'd say New Jersey and the New York City metro area for those of you who are in these areas, making it available to schools. And we, of course, want to go bigger. So just wanted to give that preview.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. We really appreciate you spending time with us and offering so many resources today that multiple people have been asking if the webinar and the resources are going to be available online. They absolutely will. We will post this recording and continue to share resources that have either come in via the chat box or things that, Bedtime Math and Laura's organization continue to add. We do have a couple of questions for you, Laura, if that's okay.
Sure.
The first, perfect. So myself and Jeremy Shore, my colleague, are going to sort of alternate so you hear different voices. We first want to ask if there are any activities or resources on the sites that you mentioned that are for older kids or tweens, teens, that age group.
Sure. Again, the games, some of them are very clearly for younger kids because they really are working on some of those basic math facts. Although I would note that sometimes the adults need help on that too. And in fact, chucking the beach ball, I mean, we've had middle schoolers love that game and find that actually they need the practice. I should also point that like the M&M Madness one, my 16-year-old daughter is taking AP statistics, and she actually unprompted took our 2 or 3 bags of M&Ms that we had sorted out, and she actually ran like confidence intervals on what was the most likely outcome for the next bag we open. I mean, you can really take these and run with them with older kids. And sometimes it's their own creativity. If they're taking trigonometry and they fold up an airplane, they're going to see what they can do with that. So we haven't explicitly said that stuff in these instructions because we also are cognizant that our normal target audience is K through 5 and we don't want to intimidate people. But if that's something that we think there's interest in, it'll be easy for us to put a little link to another page with like for more challenge or for more math. We can certainly talk about that.
Thanks, Laura. So first of all, we've actually had several people asking about older kids. So I don't think you need to necessarily answer that, but I think that'd be really great. And we'll make sure to pass that along to the attendees and to everybody in the network. Sharon Schultz had an interesting question. She's asking about the Pirate Treasure Hunt game and how you might adapt that to use the multiplication chart. Have you thought about that, and what might that look like?
Oh, like the picture. Well, certainly that's a great idea, and I think that's very workable from what it is. When kids pick the coordinate and they land on that spot, if you multiply the X coordinate and the Y coordinate, you're going to get the area of the rectangle that is filled in by where you're standing and the origin. So it actually does lend itself very nicely to multiplication. That's a great idea. I'm actually going to write that down because we can just stick that in the instructions and put a new PDF up. So thank you. All this feedback, by the way, is super helpful. I should say that I should give a big shout out and a thank you to the many teachers and parents along the way who, when they've done our games, have given us ideas that are now in there, which is great.
Great. Thank you, Laura. And we're so glad that we can help add, our audience can help add to your growing collection of resources.
Yeah, that's great.
We have a question that has come in from Megan Barrett, that she has an 11-year-old that has missed basics in math and is wondering what you recommend starting with.
Yeah, I would say, well, for the math facts, I think beach ball is absolutely a great starting point, because what you want to do is make sure, as I said, you want the scaffolding built in. And I mean, the first step is cardinality, like really making, and this is even separate from the beach ball, making sure they understand that these 3 fingers and this pile of 3 apples both represent 3. You know, then you want to make sure they understand when they're counting that when you count the next number, you've added 1. And the counting on exercise with the beach ball is great for just the fluency with the numbers, but you also want to do that with objects. I would say that actually the other game that's good for this is Face Off, because you can have the child and, you know, draw something and cut it into the pieces and then work on just the counting and the adding. You can do area because you can multiply, oh, here's this part of the face, it's 3 boxes across and 4 boxes in height. How many little squares are there? And then work your way up to the exercises with the fractions. Yeah, I think it's interesting because Sal Khan from Khan Academy talks about this, about Swiss cheese learning and how in our schools we keep pushing kids through lessons that they don't have any hope of understanding because they didn't get the one before it, and that because we have such a rigid assembly line type of system, you know, kids just get shoved through and they haven't quite caught all of it. And he also talks about how you shouldn't really move on to a new topic unless you got 95% right on the previous one. Well, we don't do that in our schools, right? You can get a 70 or a 75% on a quiz. That is deemed passing, and you move on. That is how we've wound up with a whole country of adults who are nervous about calculating the tip, right? So it's great that you're catching it, and I encourage you to really just take the time and the patience to start from the beginning, have those easy wins, those victories with counting, simple adding, and then working your way up. And I really believe anybody can do this math. It's just a matter of starting, mastering it, and really working up through it.
Our friend Andreas has a question. He's curious about the facilitator guides, whether there are facilitator guides for these activities on the teacher side, and if so, how people can find those.
So what we've set up on Cabin Fever Math is truly a response to the many parents and kids who are stuck home. If a teacher wants to do these games in school, that does have a pretty extensive guide for the teacher that goes with it. To that point, and this is why we've been rolling out only in our local area, we do teacher PD, where we teach the games to the teachers and walk through that whole facilitator guide with them, so they're solid on teaching it. We've contemplated whether we could do this with other places in the country via a video call like this with teachers, and I'm happy to explore that. So afterwards, if you want to connect us, happy to have that conversation.
Quick follow-up. First of all, there's been a lot of interest in teacher PD, so I think that is a thing that people would be interested in. But somebody was asking where they can find more information on the New Jersey specific teacher PD.
Well, it's called Fun Factor, and there is a page on our website. If you just Google Bedtime Math Fun Factor, you'll get to that page, and it does summarize what we're doing, and it lists those goals. It talks a little bit about how we got this started, and there's an email of I believe it's my colleague Shana Sackett-Gable, where you can email for more information, and we're happy to talk.
Great, thank you so much. And I will note to those on the line that Laura has graciously offered to continue to answer any questions that might come through after this webinar. If you want to email us at info@stemecosystems.org, we're happy to make sure any of your questions are answered. Laura, we have another question from our friend Toby asking about fun math songs. Do you have any fun math songs that are great for introducing or reinforcing math concepts?
Oh, we don't have math songs, but I will mention that, because I'm just a music lover and music and math tie together so beautifully. One of the games on that page for that link that I showed is called Got Rhythm, and it is actually all about basically the Broadway show Stomp. It's doing Stomp in your own house with pots and pans and pencils, and really exploring rhythms and multiples of 2 and 4 and 8 and 16, and of course fractions as well, eighth notes, quarter notes. So it's not a song, but actually there's a ton of math in it. And then there's also a dance routine you can do from step, which is a style of dance that's very rhythmic and has lots of numbers in it. So now, as far as fun math songs, I do love, and my kids still love it too, 3 is a Magic Number is just a classic. We love that one. And my kids they knew their multiples of 3 really early because of that Schoolhouse Rock classic. Although I think we listened to the Blind Melon remake of it.
Add to that too, there's a really great website called Flowcabulary. I'll put it in the chat, which are hip hop songs on educational topics, but they have a whole section on math, geometry, and statistics, and elementary math, and all those things. So we'll put that both in the blog post and in the chat as well. Laura,
note that is something that I think hip hop is great. It's so rhythmic, and some of those songs are great. I don't know them, but I know that KIPP Academy, that was really how that school network got going. That's something they were known for, is coming up with songs like that.
Absolutely. Laura, Megan is asking, and this isn't specifically the content that you have now, but she's has a student who's 14 years old and is currently in algebra, who is also stuck home, and she's trying to think about ways to make algebra and algebraic thinking fun and game based. Do you have any ideas or resources that might support that?
Well, one idea, and I was actually going to mention this earlier, but was trying to keep the talk moving when I was saying that we don't give kids enough credit for what they can do. I heard an awesome talk by the president of a university where he talked about how if you write 2x plus 5 equals 9 on the board or on a piece of paper, people just start sweating, right? They see the x and they're like, oh my God, algebra. But he said, if you say to a second grader, I have a mystery number in my head, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but if you double it and add 5, you'll get 9. You don't even have to say, what's the mystery number? Kids are off and running and they figure it out. They actually know how to back up 5, cut in half. They don't realize they're doing equal operations to both sides of the equal sign. Like they are doing algebra in their heads. They are actually able to do it. And as this university president said, it takes a sophisticated curriculum to beat that natural skill out of people, but somehow we do it. Algebra is a natural thing. I think that mystery number is great because that's a simple one I gave you, but you can do anything with that. Also, I will mention that in the bedtime math problems on our app, a lot of them have an extra layer called, or a level of question called the sky's the limit. And that was because people said, older siblings were getting jealous and wanted a math problem of their own. A lot of those do have algebra and they are playful because we'll do things like, you know, there's one picture of like a balloon car that has like 200 red balloons. It was a float like from a parade, 200 red balloons, 50 yellow ones, 4 blue. There are all kinds of ratios in that. And you can say, well, if there are twice as many of this color as that color, and the total is 62, how many are there of each? Actually, that won't work because you need a multiple of 3. But, you know, you can have all kinds of questions where there's essentially a mystery number that you're solving for, and they can get pretty complicated. So I do recommend checking out our app and looking at some of the sky's the limit questions because some of those involve algebra. And beyond that, good resources. I mean, I know there are websites out there like the Art of Problem Solving and some of the competition math. A lot of that uses algebra. That's getting more challenging, but I think it's a great thing to aim for once mastering the basic parts.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. And, you know, there are so many great ideas as well as questions and comments. You're getting overwhelming thanks. I don't know if you can see it. It's difficult to talk and read at the same time, but folks are really appreciating the great insight. There are also several really good ideas about the facilitator guides, PDs, and other resources. And so just a quick plug again that we are open to hosting more webinars and are looking to all of you as community leaders to help us find webinar topics and ideas. So please let us know if you have some. I have another question for you, Laura. We might be dwindling down on those, but in the current situation with social distancing and a lot of us kind of staying home, are there any games or recommendations that you have around people playing these types of math games that are remote friendly or social distancing friendly?
Meaning like within a family?
Sure, or maybe even on FaceTime.
Oh, like doing things virtually. Well, some of those games you could do virtually. It's hard though, because our games are very hands-on, like Face Off. You know, you could definitely each have your own face that you've cut out, but in order to interact, you have to go back and forth. I think that some of them like that don't require actual paper, like the Got Rhythm, you could definitely get on FaceTime with other people and be playing music. If you don't have too much of a lag, you could be doing that one together. You could certainly have, if different kids have M&Ms, they can each make their own chart at home and then get all online and share them with each other. I mean, there are things you can do. I think anything involving statistics, it's fun to crowdsource the numbers. So like the M&M one, or any items you might have in the house where you can, you know, take count of them and take statistics. You can then get on with your friends and do that. I hadn't thought about that too explicitly. That's a great idea also, like which things are FaceTimeable. And we'd be happy if we can generate ideas on that. Happy to work that in. But it's a good point. We're all stuck at home and not able to do play dates and things. So it's a good idea.
Sorry about that. I apparently forgot to unmute. A couple folks are asking about the beach ball and whether or not there are directions on your site to kind of make those with things people might already have at home, like balloons or whatever.
Yes, if you go to that link where I said, if you go to the link, there's a cute little thumbnail icon for each game with its name. And if you click on that, a PDF will come up. And the beach ball one, the PDF does explain how to just do that with any ball in the house. You can take a beach ball, if it's one that you consider you're happy to make permanently, you can write the numbers right on the beach ball, or you can put pieces of masking tape and write the numbers and then peel them off later. But yeah, you can absolutely make your own ball.
Great. So Laura, again, we wanted to thank you all. Thank you so much. I know that everybody is incredibly grateful for the time that you spent, the thought that you've invested in Bedtime Math, and the many students and families that you're serving with this wonderful program. I wanted to remind everybody that we do have another webinar coming up on Tuesday where we will be talking with superintendents all over the country who will share both their fears, their frustrations, their hopes, and the actual strategies that they've been using to try to engage student learning during these challenging times. That webinar will be Tuesday at 1 p.m. and I'm sure that you'll be getting many emails from us. We apologize for stuffing your inboxes over the last few days. We feel it's really important that everybody gets this information, and that's what you've asked us to do. So we are responding as quickly as we can. And also, please be sure to check out the website where we are continuing to add resources that you have been sharing with us that you think could be useful for others at www.stemecosystems.org. And Veronica, Jeremy, Laura, anything else that you would like to say?
Well, this is Laura. I can just chime in that if you go to our website, you can check out that link, but also you can write the feedback at bedtimemath.org if you have questions or if you have suggestions. Again, this is a mad scramble to create more content. I mean, we have a lot up there, but we want to keep putting more stuff up. And if people have ideas, we would love to hear them and love to work them in so we can share them with others.
And thank you, Laura. And we will share that email address when we send out today's webinar summary, and know that you'll be hearing, I'm sure, from many members of the community of practice. So thanks again, Laura, so much. And thank you all. Yeah, and everybody stay safe, and we will talk to you early next week. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.